Welcome to this explainer on the psychology of mental overload and quiet spaces. So, have you ever noticed how the silence of an empty room or, the pitch dark of night can just suddenly make your brain decide it's the absolute perfect time to intensely analyze an awkward handshake you had back in 2014? Yeah, you're definitely not alone. Today, we're going to unpack this really fascinating psychological phenomenon. We're going to explore exactly what happens to our minds when the world around us just suddenly stops, and why, for some of us, that external silence acts like a giant megaphone for our internal thoughts. So settle in, grab a notebook if you like, and let's explore the architecture of the quiet mind. Okay, let's dive into this. If you're an overthinker, you already know the profound, pull-your-hair-out frustration of this exact scenario. You've been exhausted all day long, you literally crave sleep, you finally turn off the lights, toss the phone on the nightstand, and rest your head on the pillow. And then, bam, your brain completely wakes up. No warning, just 0 to 60. It's like someone flipped a switch and suddenly your mind is running a full-blown marathon. It can totally feel like a betrayal by your own body, right? But as you'll see, it's actually a highly specific, totally logical response to the environment you've just created.
Section 1. The Midnight Brain Activation and the Shift Quiet.
So here is the core truth we need to understand. The brain wakes up at night when distractions disappear. It's not necessarily the time of day that's causing your mind to race. It's the sudden, complete removal of daytime distractions. Just think about your average day for a second. It's filled with this constant, rapid-fire stream of sensory input, right? Emails pinging, conversations, traffic noise, music, screens everywhere. Your brain is entirely occupied with navigating all of these external stimuli, but at night, all of that just vanishes. The sudden absence of that input actually acts as a direct trigger. The quiet isn't just an empty space. To your brain, it's a sudden, massive shift in its environment.
Moving on to Section 2. When quiet becomes loud and the inverse relationship.
And this brilliantly illustrates a direct inverse relationship. On one side, your external environment drops to 0. The distractions completely disappear. But on the other side, your internal environment absolutely spikes. Your thoughts get louder. Why? Well, because your brain is no longer spending its precious energy processing the outside world, so all of that processing power just turns inward. The quiet environment literally amplifies your internal voice. It's kind of like being in a crowded, noisy restaurant where you can barely hear the person sitting right next to you. But if everyone else in the room suddenly stopped talking, even a tiny whisper would sound like a shout. That is exactly what happens in your mind when the external noise drops away.
Which brings us to Section 3. The imaginative mind and processing the overload.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that we really need to reframe how we view this late-night mental marathon. It's not a flaw. It's simply mental overload. That's the accumulation of psychological pressure that a highly imaginative mind just has to process. See, if you have a highly imaginative mind, you're absorbing, analyzing, and creating ideas all day long. But because you're so busy dealing with external distractions, that psychological pressure just builds and builds in the background. Your brain literally hasn't had a chance to organize or release any of it. So those racing nighttime thoughts, they aren't a sign of anxiety or insomnia by default. They're simply the backlog of an active, imaginative brain finally taking the opportunity to process the day's mental overload.
Let's walk through this psychological chain reaction step by step to see how it all connects. First, step 1, the quiet environment removes your daily distractions. The noise finally, blissfully stops. Consequently, step 2 kicks in. Because that external noise is gone, your internal thoughts suddenly become louder. The volume just cranks way up on your inner monologue. And this leads us to the absolutely crucial final step, step 3, pressure release. By allowing these loud thoughts to just play out in the quiet, the highly imaginative mind is actually doing some seriously important maintenance. It's sorting through the mental overload, categorizing it, and finally releasing that pressure valve. So the quiet space isn't the enemy here. It's the necessary facilitator for this vital release.
Let's move to Section 4 and see how this builds. Section 4. Releasing mental pressure and the role of self-talk.
So the crucial point is the best tool here is verbal self-talk. It is a vital mechanism used by highly imaginative minds during quiet times to release built-up mental pressure. I mean, have you ever found yourself talking out loud when you're finally alone? Pacing the room, maybe having a full-blown, passionate debate with yourself. Well, don't worry, you aren't losing your mind. You are basically just defragmenting your mental hard drive. Speaking your thoughts out loud forces the brain to slow down. It has to organize those thoughts into linear sentences. It takes the swirling, abstract chaos of a loud mind and gives it tangible structure. For the imaginative mind, verbal self-talk in a quiet space is a legitimate, totally necessary pressure valve to process all that mental overload. Which brings us to our final thought for today.
How might you intentionally use quiet spaces during the day to release mental pressure rather than just waiting for the night? Think about it. If we know that the brain needs quiet to process its overload, and if we know that an imaginative mind is going to force this processing the absolute second distractions disappear at bedtime, why not take control of the process yourself? Imagine just carving out 10 minutes of pure, uninterrupted quiet in the middle of your afternoon. Let your thoughts get loud, use some of that verbal self-talk, and consciously release that pressure. You might just find that when your head finally hits the pillow later that night, your brain is already clear, calm, and totally ready to rest. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and hey, I really hope you find some constructive quiet time today.